All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Rudy Shankar. I'm the director of the Lehigh Energy Systems Engineering Program, and you'll be listening to the fifth in our series of talks in our course. And I'm really pleased to introduce to you Vinny Aguiar. He's a alumni from this program, and it's really enjoyable to have him back. He's going to be talking about a very important subject, storage, and he's with Form Energy. So a little bit of bio of Vinny before we start the session. Vinny is a manager in Form Energy's finance team, where he heads the commercial finance function and supports the company's leadership and commercialization strategy and fundraising activities. Prior to joining Form, Vinny was a project leader in the energy and climate and sustainability practices at Boston Consulting Group. He advised senior leaders on a range of strategic challenges related to energy transition. His work included developing a growth strategy for a battery energy storage system integrator, creating a go-to-market plan for an integrated energy company to uh, serve the data center sector with low carbon power, and assessing the investment landscape of sustainable fuels for institutional investors. Vinny began his career as an associate in the energy practice at Charles River. He holds a M.Eng in energy degree from Lehigh and a BS from the uh, degree of Engineering, Arts, and Sciences (IDEAS) program, both at Lehigh University. He also completed an executive education certificate in climate and sustainability from the Columbia Climate School. So that's really very impressive. And just before we start the talk, I just want to kind of remind everybody this talk will be for 90, the section is for 90 minutes. 60 minutes is for the speaker and 30 minutes for Q&A. And Vinny, if you want to take questions during your presentation, by all means. If not, then we just reserve the question after your talk ends, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
great.
All right, so here we go. Vinny, you're on the stage.
Amazing. Well, it's great to see everyone, see some familiar faces, and to meet other folks. Rudy, thank you for the wonderful introduction. And, it's a pleasure to be back with the Lehigh crew, where I had such a formative period of my life. And, as Rudy mentioned, I've done a number of things and now happen to be lucky enough to be one of the folks here at Form Energy. And for the talk today, we're going to be talking about long duration storage. And in the space of energy systems, as all of you know, right now, we very much need to be taking in all of the above in terms of solving the complexities that the grid faces. So in today's talk, I want to make sure that you're caught up on Form Energy. I think some folks are going to come at this from various degrees of familiarity with the company and the problem that we're trying to solve. So we're going to start with an overview of the company, its progress, and some of the key highlights, right? Including the problem that we face today, what solution Form Energy is tackling, and how we're planning to bring that to market, and some of the differentiations of our solution versus some of the others out there in the market. Next, I want to make sure that we dive into the market opportunity. Oftentimes, when I speak with our customers, investors, there are folks on a spectrum of this is an urgent need versus this thing is really far away. There's really no need for it today or in the next 5 years. I would contend and will assert today that it's very much an immediate need, and I'll show you some of the proof points in the traction that we're seeing in the market. And next, I want to dive into the technology. While I have my master's in energy systems engineering, I am no electrochemist, and I'm not a specialist on our technology. I understand it enough and am conversant. So there might be questions that come at me where I have to punt and chase the answers for you, but I will try to do my best to address those technical questions to the best of my ability. And then we can take a look at a number of other topics, right, with the time we have right now, including how Form has shaped the creation of demand with some proprietary modeling, what we're seeing in terms of the shifting political and policy landscape and its impact on energy storage and market, the market attractiveness of the technology and the space that we're in, among other things. So without further ado, I'm going to get started with Form. So Form Energy is commercializing a new asset class for the grid. So when you talk about storage, folks think about it in various duration ranges. Lithium-ion today is in that short duration range. And Form Energy started in 2017 with the mission of solving a missing part of the puzzle. Our founders, as you can see some of them here on the page, came from various backgrounds in energy storage, grid modeling, electrochemistry. So Matteo, for example, our CEO, was at Tesla, where he founded, somewhat secretively, the energy storage business. And running along with some of the other leadership there, they saw a very pressing need in the grid for a product like they were developing for cars. Short duration batteries could have a huge role to play in the market. So they stood up the energy storage business at Tesla, made it successful. And when he got out of Tesla, he was thinking about what's next. And that long duration, problem broadly, folks talk about long duration. It could be anything like 10 to 12 hours, 24 plus, and 100-hour plus. He wanted to zero in on that problem. So Form Energy was founded to go after that solution. The way that folks tackled that problem was somewhat different, and is what attracted me to Form from its inception. I was always a fan, listened to podcasts all the time, and the story goes like this, and some of you might be familiar, right? The team was zeroing in on how do we solve the long duration problem, and what does the grid need? So if we go at it from a modeling perspective, what are the parameters that we need to solve for to bring an asset class, a battery storage asset class, that can provide firm capacity to the grid? And they zeroed in at the founding of the company into three parameters, and that was 100-hour duration, $20 per kilowatt hour cost, and a round trip efficiency in the mid 30s to mid 40s range to make the math work. And that's how Form Energy got started. Since then, it's brought on a ton of investment, 1.2 billion plus in equity capital. It has put together a winning management team, and we are now approaching 1,000 employees across 3 sites in the US. As you see here on this map, the east based in Somerville, where I'm sitting today, was the birth of the company. So where a lot of the basic science and R&D took place. Next, we started our hub in the Bay Area, and we're in Berkeley, and that's where a lot of the engineering work got done, a lot of testing, and we still have a very strong site there. And most recently, with our operation starting in 2024, we built a factory in West Virginia in a town called Weirton, where I will be later tonight. I'm actually flying out of Boston to Weirton for some meetings tomorrow. And lots to cover there in terms of the history, why we selected it. But that's a brief overview of Form Energy, right? A company that's been in business for about 8 years, is tackling a multi-day duration problem, not just the short duration range, and a company that's gotten a lot of traction, both commercially, with investors, with utilities, and really creating a new market for something that's much needed. Now, if there are no questions, I'll keep moving us along. But like Rudy said, I'm happy to take questions along the way if folks have any pressing questions. Hearing none, I'll keep going, right? So, over the past 8 years, there's been a lot of progress that's been made at Form, from a technical perspective, from a commercial and market creation perspective, and also from a manufacturing, operations perspective. Standing up a business that's bringing a new technology that hasn't been thought of before, and bringing that online to market, and manufacturing it in the United States is no easy task. But the Form team has been, taking that on, with a lot of determination. So as you can see here, over these last 8 years, there's a lot of things that have happened to make this possible. From, literally a battery in a cup to now delivering first enclosures to our first customer. Form has been on a path to de-risk the technology chemistry, to bring the best in class engineering practices to creating a system like this, and to then thinking about how do we make it manufacturable at cost and something that's reliable and safe to our customers. I'll note here on this top right side of the page, this factory was constructed in less than a year in West Virginia. The government there has been incredibly supportive of our presence. The state of West Virginia alone gave us a grant of almost $300 million to stand up this operation there in the state, and has been incredibly supportive of Form's journey so far. And as we think about where we're headed next in this continuum here, we've put projects on the ground internally to test and validate the technology works, that it's safe, it operates. But now it's a commercial inflection, and hence my joining Form at the point that I did. We are now at a place where it's about ramping up, deploying, and scaling up the company. So I'm going to jump into the next topic, which is going to be going over what is the problem that we're solving, what's the solution we're bringing to market. But let me just pause here and see if there's any Form-related questions.
You see the question in the chat box, Vinny?
I don't see the chat box in my screen right now, but if you could keep an eye out for that, Rudy, that would be much
All
appreciated.
right. There's a question from Mark. And stating round trip efficiency, how does that compare to lithium battery technology? I agree cost is a big issue in lithium, but how does that relate to efficiency if Li is typically higher than 30 to 40%?
Yeah. We will cover that in a bit, but let me answer shortly and then we can jump into it. So, yeah, I think lithium-ion is going to be something in the 70, 80 plus range on route trip efficiency. And it is higher, but it's solving for a different problem, right? So when you're talking about spurts of energy and the way that lithium-ion operates versus how our battery operates, it is, a different, operation entirely. A better analogy to what Form's battery does, and we'll get to that in a second, is thinking about it as a peaker plant. A gas peaker plant is fairly low efficiency. It is standing by for critical areas of grid stress. That's similar to what a Form battery does. It has a low capacity factor. It is, not as energy dense as some other options, but that's by design. Because if you go for high efficiency, you're making a trade-off on CapEx. And to make the battery system work for a dispatchable profile for operating costs, CapEx, that works for that use case, then you've got to be thinking about sacrificing something. And with the iron air chemistry, round trip efficiency is where you take a hit. And in a lot of cases, and we've done a lot of modeling and work with our clients on this, it is cheaper to pay for the extra charging costs by giving up efficiency than it is to pay the CapEx to get those round trip efficiency points up by an order of 20x. It's quite significant. But Mark, happy to go back to your question as we move through the flow here. But let me know if any other follow-ups there. So, coming back to the problem, right? I think, and I'm not sure where everyone comes at it, in the crew here, but the demand drivers are very clear. We are in a world of historic electricity demand. The acceleration from AI, whether you think it's overhyped, it's 2 to 3x the size it should be, it is a step change in how load growth and utility planning has taken place in the US, as a lot of you are familiar. That is one of the core fundamental beliefs that most people in the utility space have right now. How we've been planning in the past, is not keeping up with the pace of growth that we see in the next planning cycle. So that is a very clear, tailwind that we face today. And coupled with that, the shift to more intermittent generation creates, less stability in the system, hence the need for firm capacity for something like form energy. And the last thing, and maybe one that's off the page, first, volatility in weather patterns are creating even more stability in the grid. You've got more load, you've got more intermittency, you've got more volatility from the frequency and the magnitude of some of the events that you're seeing in the system, and overlay on that, where applicable, the need, the ambition, the targets to decarbonize. You're creating a multi-layered problem that demands new solutions. And when we think about what tools, what technologies are needed, as I said at the beginning, we see the need for multi-day storage, and specifically a 100-hour battery as a key tool in the toolbox for energy systems planners, operators, and such. Now, why 100, right? It is a round number, and it is easier for folks to wrap their heads around, but it really is a multi-day problem. And when we think about what kind of problems our battery can solve, these are some of the main use cases that you can see a form battery tackling. So, when you've got back-to-back days of tight conditions, or multiple scarcity periods, or a long continuous period of shortfall in terms of your demand and your supply, that's where a battery fits in. So let's take that middle case, for example, comparing it to a lithium-ion battery. Generally speaking, let's say, you're in the ERCOT market or somewhere else. If you have a lithium-ion asset, it will look for some of those early peaks in a heat dome. It will discharge, and it will not be able to charge when prices are sky high. It will find other opportunities to do so, but it will not be able to address the full gap in that back-to-back period. That's one example or one use case of a multi-day storage battery. On the right side, you might have some extreme situation where assets are coming offline, whether it's from forced outages, from damages, from there's just no sun, there's no wind from during some type of weather system. Then you've got a shortfall that lasts multiple days. So what we've seen from modeling this problem over and over again across US and international markets is that this 100-hour is a sweet spot. You've got lithium ion that plays a great role in the short duration game, but then there's going to be a valley of value, as some of the folks here like to call, beyond a 24-hour range, where when you get back to the 100-hour duration, then you've got a battery asset that has a lot of value on the grid. So from the early days of modeling the system, all the smart folks here that do our grid planning modeling, which we'll get into more details later in terms of how differentiated it is from how folks do it today, zeroed in on this 100-hour duration as a problem that was worth solving, that had a large market to go after. Now, what are we bringing to market, right? So Form's battery is a multi-day system in terms of 100 hours, let's say 4 days plus. That provides firm capacity. We will talk about this metric a little bit later in the comparison to lithium, to gas peakers, is cost competitive and is ready to deploy. And that is really important right now. When we have conversations with customers, they're coming to us with firm capacity needs, and they're urgent. They're not 5 years out. There are a lot of folks who are in a pinch right now, given the supply chain constraints around gas turbines across the US and in other markets as well. So the solution that we're bringing to market is something that we believe is well timed and is fit for purpose in terms of what folks need in the energy system today. Like I said earlier, it's not the only solution, it's not a silver bullet, but it is something that is differentiated and has a value to play in the system. Now, you might ask, how is it different than everything else that's out there? And here's a brief comparison. I think this slide's a little dense, but bear with me briefly as we talk about some of the points here. What we think about in terms of forms differentiation is, you are delivering firm capacity at the right tech specs that are needed. And when you look across the landscape of solutions, there are a lot of them. Shorter duration storage all the way on the right, they can't be counted on as firm capacity for a number of different reasons in terms of how utilities plan for what accredited capacity they might get. Some folks use ELCC for that metric. It will be too low for what's needed for a firm capacity asset. When you think about the ability to deploy some of the novel technologies like fission or SMRs or gas with carbon capture, there is questions about the scalability of that near term. And then when you think about some of the other competitors, there will be a place for geothermal to play along with forms technology and for other technologies as well. Now, is it the only thing that's going to be deployed? Absolutely not. It is one of the solutions for a system that is quite complex and requires diversity. On the point on duration and why it matters, one thing to think about is, like I said, we are there for grid stress events. We're not deploying year round. It's not something that's got a 60, 70, or 80% capacity factor. It's more in the neighborhood of 15 to 20%. So what matters then is your availability or dispatchability for those grid stress events. So if you're thinking about the highest LMP hours as a metric for stress in the system, and we took a couple of examples of markets here, and we've done this across the board. Are you available? Are you able to meet that need given the parameters of the technology? Lithium-ion will be stressed because, or will deliver less because the duration alone is just not going to get you what you need from a dispatchability perspective. On the thermal side, you've got a couple of different factors that will push you on the lower range there. They can get up to the 90s, but it could also be lower depending on what kind of temperature profiles or outage profiles you're looking at. So it is reliable, it is dispatchable, but it's not going to be quite as high. The iron air technology has got that differentiation of being available when is needed. And that is something that folks have been chatting with us about as a core value to them, because if folks are familiar with the utility business, a lot of senior executives lose their job over inability to deliver. The grid is matched on an instantaneous basis. You need to have access to call upon, and that's one differentiation that forms technology delivers. A second, another element here is being able to be cost competitive, and how we think about that. There are different metrics to think about as you think about costs. There is LCOE, it's often used. There is levelized cost of storage, which is a Lazard methodology that folks use. When we think about comparing our technology to others, the most fair and appropriate metric that Form thinks about is the levelized cost capacity. That is thinking about both operating and capital costs over the lifetime of that project and corrected for the accredited capacity that we'll get. So, if you think about what a lithium-ion battery might get versus a Form iron air battery, it will be quite different. Depending on the duration, Form's ELCC range, and this is not something that's been codified yet because it's on the novel side, will be in the 95 range plus. A lithium-ion battery, if it was maybe in the 10-hour range, could be reaching 70s in some areas, and those accredited capacity ranges have been degrading over the years. So that helps you think about, well, I've got some costs, but then I got to spread it through what accredited capacity I'm going to get. And when you do the math on this, iron air technology comes out ahead for most cases compared to lithium, because again, it can be counted on as a firm capacity asset, and it can be on par with gas depending on region, your fuel cost assumptions, your capex, et cetera. And as you think about this going forward, it is gas peakers. It is a tricky area to be in. It's not readily available supply. Everybody's trying to bring these units to market, and they are facing a lot of hurdles to do so. I'm seeing some chat questions coming up, and I'm going to open it here just to make sure I'm not missing things. PowerPoint PDF after the session. Yes, can take a look at sharing this with Rudy, an abridged version, and has Form confirmed rebate incentives similar to lithium. Mark, could you elaborate on the question? Are you talking about tax credits or rebates at a state level or something like that? Yes, we can get into tax credits, incentives um, of that sort. Yes, Form does qualify for a number of different tax credits, and there's certainly something that's enabled the scale up of the company and shaped the decision to be a US manufacturer for sure. So we talked about the fact that duration matters. We talked about the fact that, this technology is cost competitive. Next, we're going to address the fact that, to do this now, you need to have the speed to deliver in the timeline that folks need. When you think about what those lead times are for gas, nuclear, they're going to be quite long. There's a ton of backlogs in the gas space, and there's quite a bit of uncertainty on the SMR space in terms of when projects are going to come back online. The optimist side of me wants all of these right now and as soon as we can get them. But the reality is, things that get you there faster are going to be renewables paired with storage and iron air batteries in the system so that you can get cost competitive capacity that's readily available in a planning time frame that will help alleviate some of the short-term constraints, especially driven by the data center craze that's gotten so much press recently. So I'm not going to cover that in too much detail. So again, this is something that has got the right duration for the problem of firm capacity, is within a competitive range on the cost side, and has the ability to get online in a timeline that matters, with near and medium term planning in mind. So, we believe the opportunity to go after this is quite tremendous, and that's where I'm going to go next. But before I do so, I wanted to pause and see if there are any other questions that I could take before we keep moving on.
Questions for Vinny? Guess not. Where'd you continue, Vinny? Oh, sorry.
All right.
Mark, did you have a question? I guess not. Go ahead, Vinny. Continue.
Yeah, sure. So, a lot of our time here at Forum is really spent on the, technology, how to get this deployed at scale, at cost, safely, et cetera. Part of my job is thinking about the commercial angle of it. So I'll spend some time here talking about, what we see as a very exciting space for multi-day storage and happy to take some questions along the way or pause at the end again. You know, when we talk about addressable market, this is something that folks, have different takes on it. Needless to say, this is a terawatt scale market. When you think about the need for firm capacity in the market that Form addresses, one, sort of rule of thumb, if you want to think about sizing, is if I think about assets that have a low capacity factor, gas assets, so gas peakers, for example, CTs, 15, 20% capacity factor, I filter out what those gigawatts are in the system, and I think about meeting new need for them as the grid is growing and loads growing everywhere, and replacing some of the aging assets that are being taken offline. That gets you into already pretty close to the terawatt scale range. If you layer onto that any of the other vectors of growth, like electrification, the adoption of emerging tech, and if you think about the upside, if we are more bullish on net zero and decarbonization, the market's quite big. But big numbers like this don't really make a business work. So we got to think more, closer to us, where's the demand coming from? But in this section, we're going to talk about what are some of those drivers of demand, and then zero in on across key geographies for Form Energy. Where's the demand coming from? Is it real? Do we really see that demand converting into, planning from utilities, requests for proposals, and ultimately, contracts that a company like Form can go after? And the answer is yes, the demand is there. We've contracted for it, and we continue to do so. So when we think about those drivers of demand, right, load growth, like I said, I'm not going to belabor the point here, is tremendous, right? We have a global system that's growing and doubling by 2050, which is not a ton in that time frame. But the interesting piece is data centers are becoming a key piece of that. And in the utility world, you don't see, mid-teen, high teens growth, generally speaking. In the US, you've been flat to declining across geographies, but now driven by global data center demand, and especially in the US, that is becoming an incredibly important vector for grid planning. And it's exciting for a business like ours going after new gigawatts of capacity. So I'm going to skip over the next page on data centers and talk about the second piece there we talked about, which was renewables. Very briefly, because I think everybody here is very familiar. Across the board, you're seeing a tremendous amount of electricity coming from renewables. And some of the biggest markets out there are going to be China, US, and India. United States is where we're based. It's where we're focused, and it's likely where a lot of the growth is going to happen for Form in the near term. But there's going to be a lot of different markets that we go after from not just a renewables perspective, but a true need for firm capacity on the grid. Third is the policy piece. And here's where I want to spend more of our time. And here is thinking about what is driving the demand for, multi-day storage across various geographies that Form is playing in. I'll start at the global level first, and then I'll dive into the US picture. So when you think about where Form's focused, United States is our core market today, but there are a number of places where we are prioritizing in the near term. Those include the UK and Ireland. So for example, the UK and Ireland have both, some pretty ambitious carbon-free targets in the near term. So we're talking in the next 5 years, they're trying to decarbonize fairly significantly. In the UK, they've launched a system or mechanism, rather, for procurement called cap and floor, where long duration energy storage technologies are being incentivized to auction or to put in bids in an auction and get picked up in terms of getting a bit of an incentive from the government to cover some of the financing costs and make project economics work, where the market signals are not caught up yet to give you the revenue stream for an asset like this that will be needed going forward. So there's a ton of demand in those markets alone for Form in the near term, and that's something that we're very much going after. Germany is another country that's quite interesting to form. Again, renewable energy targets, very bullish on decarbonization, have recently launched a $500 billion fund to fund infrastructure in over the next decade, which includes a focus on technologies like ours in the long duration space. And some of our partners and academics out there have studied this problem, and they see a big need for our technology, because one of the signals you can think about there is the amount of curtailment that the German market faces, and the ability of multi-day storage to plug in there, reduce that curtailment, improve reliability of the system, reduce costs. It could be quite valuable for that one specific market. And I would highlight last one here is Australia. It's a place that's quite interesting to form. It's one of the most volatile markets, electricity markets in the world. It has, again, ambitious renewable targets in the short run, and they have an aging base of thermal generation that will need replacement. And just to keep up with the growth and to do the replacement there, it's going to take a lot of new firm capacity. And across all of these markets, Form's very engaged from a commercial and policy perspective. We have key partners across all of these regions that are looking at project sites, developing bids, submitting bids, and going through the process of getting ready to receive our batteries. And we are also engaged at the policy front, because market creation for multi-day storage is not just, hey, here's a battery, do you want to sell? Do you want to buy, right? You got to think about what are the incentives and the mechanisms that make a project make money. And across all of these different markets, there are so many different rules you got to think about. So our team's been, using that time smartly to focus on where we see most value in the near term. If we zoom in on the US, there's a ton going on from not just a energy policy perspective, but also, more broadly speaking, the importance of energy dominance and strength in AI. And, if you look at recent moves by the Trump administration, we've got a number of things that are catalyzing the growth of digital and energy infrastructure in our country. Those include making AI as a national priority, expanding permitting reform, and trying to rev up the engine there to get our projects online faster. There's been some actions to make dedicated land for AI infrastructure that includes the energy to power it, including some of the sites the DOE selected for that purpose. And, to Mark's question earlier, clarity on tax credits. That's been a huge overhang in the industry over the last, couple of quarters. And coming out of the One Big Beautiful Bill earlier this year, there's been a lot of clarity on where we stand on tax credits, and it is quite advantageous for a company like Form. So, we are in a really privileged spot in the market, being in the US, but also having access to some of these interesting international markets to go after multi-day storage demand. Just to give you a flavor at the state level, what's happening, it is quite a bit. Right, and I'll highlight one specific example here on this page, which is Pacificor in the Northwest. I'll jump ahead to a page case study on that one, and then I'll come back to the overview. But I've been moving pretty fast. Might just take a moment right here to see if there are any questions and check the chat if I can find it.
Nothing new there in the chat. Any questions for Vinny?
Yeah, and folks, feel free to come off mute and ask away. No need to go on camera. Happy to take any questions. Okay, we'll keep moving along. So, as I said, right, how do you create demand for multi-day storage in a market like the US? So a lot of you might be familiar with this, but if you're not, we can talk about how that takes place. Utility procurement starts with integrated resource plans. Those are called IRPs. They're followed by a request for proposal, which means they've modeled, decided what the optimal outcome for their portfolio is, and they put out requests for different projects to bid. Then you move into bidding, contracting, and regulatory approval. Form's been able to influence this process quite successfully to make sure that multi-day storage gets picked up in the right places where it delivers value. We already see gigawatt scale of procurement for iron air multi-day storage across a lot of these geographies. By 2030, that's 6 gigawatts of capacity, way more than what we plan to produce with the ramp up of Form Factory 1. By 2045, that number is in the 20 gigawatt range. So putting it in gigawatt hour, terawatt hour terms, we're talking 600 gigawatt hours by 2030, 2 terawatt hours by 2045. This is massive demand. It is much more than Form is going to be able to meet. And it is our belief that we're not going to be the only players in town, right? There are a number of players that are looking at a problem like we are. And this is model demand. So this is the ideal case where you're seeing least cost profiles come together, and that's how they would operate. The reality in the market will be shaped by how quickly we're able to manufacture, deploy, and get these operating, which will be a different picture. But the demand picture is quite strong. Because if you go back to that previous slide, right, we are talking about shaping this first here piece of gigawatt scale of IRPs, then become RFPs looking for our projects. And that becomes then your RFP bidding, contracting, and regulatory approval. So we see a lot of demand for this. And one example is Pacificor, where we've done a lot of engagement with Pacificor, Berkshire Hathaway owned utility in the Pacific Northwest, to help them think about what is your ideal portfolio, what does that look like? And that took place mostly in the summer of 24, but some engagement before that as well. Our technology got picked up in their IRP release this year, and it was tremendous outcome for Form, with 500 megawatts being selected in their 2030 portfolio. Our belief was, this won't be procured until maybe 2028 or 2027 IRP, or RFPs rather, and it is already out for for solicitations. Both Washington and Oregon have published RFPs requesting this technology, and we're seeing a lot of developers, tier one players, not your mom and pop shop, some guys on a trailer looking to develop storage, some really big names in energy infrastructure looking to bid into these RFPs because of the belief in the need for technology like this and the utility's appetite for something like multi-day storage. Now, when you think about shaping that process, this is only the beginning. We've shaped some IRPs, but we have not engaged with all. This is going to create a flywheel effect of demand as utilities pick up this resource in their IRPs, select them for RFPs, and we get into the bidding, contracting, and approval cycle. This will be a tremendous opportunity for Form. So the market demand is very much there, and Form's already contracted on the pilot and demonstration scale, and has already been picked up in some of these RFP bidding processes in recent times. So it's an exciting market picture. That is the last bit on market that I wanted to cover. So as we close this section, I wanted to pause and see if there are some questions from the team.
There was a question. Go ahead. Question?
Yeah, can you hear me, Rudy?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for taking my questions. When you talk about market and also cost, are you including footprint of the technology versus lithium ion? How does that play into your cost factor?
Yeah, so it does play into the cost factor to the extent that it will shape the EPC costs, so your deployment cost of a system. So yes, it is factored into the cost picture. And in terms of Form's footprint, that is in a 2 to 3 megawatt per acre scale for our first generation technology, and it quickly evolves as we look out into the technology roadmap, and with a potential to 10x on density within, by the end of the decade.
The question in the chat box from Zabrigis. What is the lead time for a 100 megawatt Form facility?
So that project development cycle, probably in the range of 18 months. And
Another question. Sorry.
I see this one here. Is
Yeah.
this a transmission grid product or distribution grid product or both? So Form's battery system is designed to be a front of the meter system, and it would be. It is not a transmission, or it's not a T&D asset, if that's your question. So maybe could be helpful to talk about what is a system, right? What does this look like? On the left, you see a rendering of what a site looks like, pretty much what a lithium-ion battery would look like. And in a lot of regards, from the outside, the deployment looks similar. You've got battery packs that put together in a quad pack, with 4 of them, we call them a quad pack, and that's the smallest unit of a system at a Form site. And then some of the auxiliary systems or other systems that would be part of it is a quad skid, inverter, and some other water treatment facilities and transformers that are going to be on site and so on. So when you think about the smallest unit here, which could be that enclosure, looks like a shipping container that we call battery pack, this is where all of the modules are housed. So modules would be your smallest unit of electrochemically active components. It has cell, anode, cathode, combination of a ton of those put together. Modules are packed into battery packs, and that is your smallest unit in the system. It also comes with some of the auxiliary systems for the battery, like thermal management, hydrogen exhaust, which is a byproduct of the reversible resting process, and some of the electrolyte management systems. Form's battery is made up of iron, air, and electrolyte, and it is, something that the team zeroed in on because it had the cost entitlement to go after the 100-hour duration game. So this is a brief overview of what the system looks like, and I will take any questions that folks have.
Questions for Vinny? So
Yeah,
Vinny,
I have a
sorry.
question related to the inputs for the battery. I'm assuming when you say iron, it's high purity iron. How does and if that's wrong, please correct me. How does Form how is their approach for securing kind of stable supplies of the inputs for their battery? I know critical minerals are a big talk right now in the industry.
Yeah. So for some of the early testing that we did, we used higher purity iron for getting to the right efficiencies or testing different mixes. But no, it's not. We don't source high purity iron. It's readily available global supply. A lot of markets that you can tap into for low cost, abundant supply of iron. And the magic is more in some of the additives that are put into it that don't include rare earths or any critical minerals that are in short supply, and the mixing of the electrolyte, which makes the magic happen. So on the supply side for iron, fairly de-risked, similar on the other pieces. When we think about current, where we are today, 85% of our supply chain is domestic. The remaining 15% is primarily from non-Chinese supply base, and we have a path to being 100% non foreign entities of concern by 2026.
Okay, awesome. That sounds very different than a lot of other battery companies. So thank you.
Yes, yes. And, it plays into that, tax credit question, right? Like, if you are producing something that relies a lot on foreign entities of concern or prohibited foreign entities, it's a tough game right now, especially for the lithium players, because, they're not going to be able to qualify for credits if you're going for something that's relying on supply chains that are in countries that we're not friendly with right now.
I want to follow up on this question that Mark has raised. So it looks fairly large. It looks as large as a solar farm. Do we need to look at metrics like megawatts per acre, or to look at what the size could be?
Yeah, so it does have a large footprint. So, a system is in the 2 to 3 megawatts per acre. So if you're talking about a, 20 megawatt, let's call it 2.5, and 20 megawatt system, let's call it 2 megawatts per acre. A 20 megawatt system is going to be taking quite a bit of land.
Okay.
Just
Now,
a
if you,
just a
scale that up to
follow-up,
100.
Rudy, I'm sorry. Thanks for bringing this up, because obviously footprint's a big thing in a lot of these systems. I mean, I've been in power for 25 years, from turbines, engines, all the way through the renewables. So one thing here is, can you go higher than 1 unit here? Can these things stack?
For our first iteration of the product, they're unlikely to be stacked. But, as we think about different sites, different, topology, seismic considerations, it is, and the evolution of the product itself, stacking could be an option as we develop the technology and get comfortable around the reliability picture. But early on, we're going to take a conservative approach, and, we would not consider stacking. And like I said, in Form's technology pathway, we do have a path to a product that is much higher density. It's a step change in density that would be 10x as power dense than the first iteration of the market, the product that will hit the market, which then completely changes the picture on the footprint question that you've raised. But to date, we've prioritized clients that have the footprint, have the incredibly urgent firm capacity need, that they are making this work. So there's plenty of opportunity in the short run, even at that 2 to 3 megawatt per acre footprint, to deploy this battery. And as we scale up, then you're benefiting from the gains on power density and the step change as the technology evolves.
Thanks.
Questions for Vinny?
I have another question.
Kevin, please introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, I'm Kevin. I'm currently a student in the Master's in Energy Systems Engineering program. I have a question related to kind of where Form's going next. I know you said they have some resources in Boston and the Bay Area. Are there certain ISOs or states that Form's kind of targeting that they think would be, either from a regulatory standpoint, more advantageous, or just a better market design? Like, I know ERCOT has a very different market design than the other ISOs.
Yeah, Kevin, good to see you. And that is a great question. So for sure, there are a number of reasons why certain markets are more attractive to us. And let me take them into maybe 3 buckets. One is state level mandates. California, Massachusetts, and New York, and a number of other states are more in the exploratory phase, have moved on mandating form like technology. So multi-day storage, for a certain duration. Some call it 24 plus, some might call it more on the 100-hour range. But those markets have created a very clear signal for procurement in the near term. So California's got a 1 gigawatt 2030 mandate. Massachusetts is in the 750 megawatt range. similar time frame. New York, smaller and looser requirements around the technology. Right after them, there'll be a number of states that follow suit. Some already have bills that have passed. Segments of their legislature have been on the desk for approval. Virginia being one of them, where it's passed a democratically led legislature, but got vetoed by the governor, and that could change as the governorship evolves there in Virginia. Rhode Island, Michigan, and a number of others are examples of that. It's bucket one, state level mandates. Bucket two is going to be your more market mechanism driven markets. Right now, on a merchant market basis, so outside of the vertically integrated utility game, form's not going to be competitive. There will be a hole in the project economics because the market signals that would give you the revenue stack of the various revenue streams in energy, ancillary services, and capacity markets, it won't pencil out for a system like ours. So in states where that moves faster, it will be attractive for form to prioritize. That isn't necessarily the case in the short run, but we see those being interesting in a medium to longer run. Lastly, it's going to be where the IRPs and the RFPs are popping up in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington being examples there. We're seeing utilities move with urgency to procure what we're going after. In other states where we have deep partnerships and ongoing or existing contracting with utilities, that's going to be also the case. Excel is one example of that. In Minnesota and Colorado, we were picked up in their planning. They have, ambitious plans for the deployment of multi-day storage there. So we are going to go where the procurement mechanisms, the market signals are most immediate. Those are going to be the highest value markets for form in the short run. At the same time, we will look to shape and influence the policy making, the utility planning in markets where multi-day storage can play a large role and has a lot of value to deliver, both in the US and in some of those international markets that we looked at earlier.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
We have a question in the chat box from Dan Chapley. PJM is having various issues with data centers and adequate power supply. Are you interfacing this, product with entities such as PJM?
Yes. Yeah, no, we've had a number of conversations with folks at PJM and the utilities that make up that ISO, and there is definitely a power crunch and a need there. The question is, are the market mechanisms in place to make it happen? One of our existing customers is Dominion, and that is a utility that clearly has the need for this type of technology in their system. Now, the question is, are all the market structures and mechanisms in place to incentivize the operations of a battery like forms? I'd say PJM is more in the early stages of shaping how people think about the accredited capacity for 100 hours, but it is getting a lot of pressures from the governors that make up the ISO, from the utilities, and so on. So we expect that the picture will evolve quite significantly in PJM. And as I noted before, Virginia legislature has already passed and is trying to pass again a mandate on this, so that it forces folks to think about this. From our perspective, we want demand that comes in various ways, and it doesn't have to be from a state level mandate, but that seems to be where one of the main states in PJM is headed, which is to say, we need this on the system, make it happen, and then rules will be shaped around it, versus in other places where it's more market driven, utility driven, or ISO driven. How does technology interface with other fossil fuel technologies in a microgrid environment? So Form's technology is more targeting the utility scale deployment. It is quite beneficial at a system level in terms of balancing.
Vinny, let me just, I'm sorry for interrupting. I hate to interrupt. I just want to make sure I just direct the the question where you may, want to go. Um, a lot of times in these microgrid where you're installing these battery technology, fuel cells, whatever you have, there's a lot of integration required so that there's no interruption in the utility. So how does um, how does your technology accomplish that and maybe better mitigate the issues that are involved in LI technology?
I see. So if I think of your question the right way is, what benefit can multi-day duration deliver if I'm pairing that with fossil technology? So I'm going to take the multi-day storage gas hybrid example as a way to talk through this. So if you're thinking about a deployment,
listen. I'm saying there's batteries are always going to be a backup to some other form of generation. Am I right? So
yeah.
how does forms process work more fluent in cooperation with the fossil technologies to keep the system up and going?
More fluent than Mark, maybe we take this question offline so I can understand fully the context there. But forms technology, like I said, is intended to be operated by utility at a utility scale, less so on a microgrid environment. So maybe not the right example to talk through, but happy to exchange some emails and help you get through to the bottom of it.
No, great. I mean, by all means, you got my email. This is a great topic. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry if I'm stopping the show here. I really don't want to, but I got some questions. I've dealt with a lot of things over the years in the power and how things are integrated, and I would love to discuss that with you, Vinny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So again, a question, Vinny. Would this, for example, you heard about the California duck curve and why we had to rush? We had to rush to the dirty, combustion turbines. And now, if you have adequate battery, you're able to support the duck curve even when when you're ramping up very rapidly. Is this part of that solution?
Is form part of the address?
Yeah.
Well, yes. Yeah. So forms technology will be able to help balance in a number of different timescales. So maybe let me bring up a page to help me talk through this. So for your question, right, you're thinking about the intraday problem there where solar's gone, you still have the supply.
Right.
Are you going to have an energy spurt there from multi-day storage? Yes, that is one of the discharge cases. So if you look to the right, when you're discharging in this 8 to 12 hourly bursts where there's low renewable generation, that's one use case for the battery. And it doesn't have to dispatch in just one way. That's the benefit of having the 100-hour energy storage bank is you can do some of the weekly or monthly shifting or seasonal shifting, but you can also do that, intraday shifting of energy to match the demand for the system.
So like company in California, like maybe PG&E would, contract with you to provide this capability?
So PG&E is distribution and transmission distribution, if I'm not mistaken, but whoever owns capacity in that system. So, SoCal Edison or, a number of other players, yes, they would be looking to contract with Form and in fact, as I noted earlier, California has a large mandate for multi-day storage. We are in active discussions with a number of players in that market. One of our early deployments and one of our test sites is PG&E interconnected in California near our Berkeley engineering office, where we've been doing some of the cycling and testing along with them. So yes, very much a key market for us to be in California, but not the only one.
Questions for Vinny?
Vinny, thank you so much for the presentation. Talking about the other markets, so you mentioned that like you have the presence in Dominion. And one of the things that you emphasize is that like there's this sweet spot of the 100 hours. Have they been using the storage for that duration in your experience so far? Like, like, and what kind of events were they dealing with? Was this like some kind of like a high impact, low probability, or like, and it doesn't have to be Dominion, some of the other jurisdictions. What have you seen in terms of like the actual use of the battery?
Yeah, so so to answer your question, Dominion hasn't deployed. Our first deployment is going to be at Great River Energy in Minnesota, and our first enclosures have just shipped out there recently. So in terms of how they plan to use it, there's a number of use cases, and I can bring back that page to help us think through that. But it's going to be a mix of whether it's back-to-back spurts of shortfall or an extended period of extreme weather. But the battery can respond to both. It is not limited to one versus the other. So let me bring this back up, and maybe that will help us think about it. So in the case of any utility, depending on the market that you're going to be in, that's going to be the dispatch profile of the battery for some of the situations that you might see where you're seeing tight grid conditions of undersupply. But like I said, projects are coming online. They're not online and observed. So I can't give you case studies from the customers.
Okay. Thank you so much, Vinny.
Good to see you.
Questions for Vinny?
We have a question.
I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you.
Introduce
I'm
yourself, please.
Selena in the ESE program. I was wondering if there's any sort of government incentives or just incentives in general for you guys to be specifically deployed on data centers.
There aren't, let's see, government incentives specifically for data centers. There's a number of different ways to think about that. For an asset owner, some states might make it easier to do business with them, or might make it easier to find land, or give tax breaks, etc. That will help the asset owner not form as a manufacturer to build a project in their state. Oklahoma has been has established a very strong partnership with Google, for example. There's a number of other states that have been moving in that direction. In terms of, I think, where the incentives might be more concrete, think about it from a ISO or RTO perspective. SPP is one example where they're trying to innovate on how you can get connected faster and how you make the time to power shorter for data centers. So they have launched a program called HILGA and CHILLS that helps large load customers like data centers to find faster paths to power. I think a third way where this can play out as well, and this has been happening in a number of states, is more at the state public utility commission, where you're thinking about how to structure tariffs to allow for a large load customer to find a way to indirectly pay for new load in the system. So Microsoft, I'm bringing on a large demand to your system. You're going to find a way to pass on to me the costs of building the incremental capacity needed to bring my data center load online. So those reliability or clean energy tariffs, or whatever they're called in specific jurisdictions, are a third way that you can think about how to shape that. So at a state level, you can see, or state or regional level, right? You can see, making your state more attractive for those large load customers. You can see some of the market rules around getting interconnected, loosened up or get more creative, and the tariff making also can be super helpful.
Thank you. I have one follow-up question.
Yeah.
What have you noticed to be the highest demand for these batteries? Like what kind of implementation?
It's going to be your, vertically integrated utility scale type of deployment. So in the US, if you are not familiar with the utility system or how the market operates, there will be wholesale markets where transmission and distribution and generation are separate. You've got separate entities doing both. Utilities still have monopoly over the wires, the generation, the storage. They could be owned by different players. Some of them are called independent power producers, IPPs. It could be financial players. It could be a number of other types of generation owners. In vertically integrated markets, that is all together. You've got one player that owns the wires and the generation and the storage, and they get the monopoly, but they're also responsible for delivering affordable, reliable, and safe, operations in that state or territory. That's the case in the US where we see the immediate need because that mandate for reliability and serving their customers creates, in a lot of cases, this firm capacity shortfall that has a way of being incentivized because they rate base their assets, which pretty much means they plan for a system. They think about how much it costs. That creates a financial equation that will, given a certain allowed return on equity, spit out, what they're able to charge their customers, based on their revenue requirement. Because that system is in place, there is a way to signal for, I will pay for firm capacity. In wholesale markets where it's decided by the market, it's traded in various ways. The market rules are not there across geographies to make the project economics pencil. So vertically integrated markets in the US, #1 market.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question in the chat box from Dan.
Yes, I see a number of them, and I'm going to try to hit them quickly. Who owns and manages the assets? For the most part, the utilities. It could be built by, a combination of different players. Form might just sell the battery. EPC does the whole work to deliver a tolling agreement or a PPA. Form might take on the scope of the EPC and subcontract, but ultimately, that's going to be utilities owning the assets. Is there a world where we own and operate? Potentially. It would depend on where we are on cost of capital, on whether or not we need to do that to move our product off the manufacturing line. For the near term, we don't see that, and we see the utilities operating them. Eventually, as the merchant markets open up, then you can also have independent power producers owning and operating. On the ramp up time, 5 to 10 minutes from a cold start, if you will, to use a term from the thermal world. And then on maintenance cost versus lithium, and replacement costs, reliability costs monthly. Tricky question to hit holistically speaking here, but our maintenance cost is going to be on the $50 per kilowatt year range currently, and then going down as we progress.
Okay, you covered any more questions for Vinny? So Vinny, we can assume that you have a whole bunch of capstone projects that you could be doing with us. Is that true? Student capstone projects?
If I can find a time, yes, yeah.
All right. All right, so if there are no more questions, anybody?
I'll drop my email here in the chat if folks have any follow-ups, or if anybody's early in their journey of learning about Form and want to follow up with me, I can get you connected with the right people or answer your questions, time permitting. I just got back from vacation, so I'm digging myself out of a crazy inbox. So bear with me as I get to you as soon as I can.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Vinny. Good to see you. And we look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully.
Yes, same here.
Yeah. And anyway, thanks a lot, guys. 2 weeks from today, we have our next seminar. That would be by, you recognize this person from Dernet Soft, you know, you did your first capstone project with this company, and there's still you know, he's hired like at least 3 or 4 people from here, from Lehigh. So he'll be the
That's
speaker.
amazing.
We'll be talking about virtual power plant implementation at on the Queso territory. So that should be an interesting talk. 2 weeks from today. Anyway, if there's any other questions you have for me or for Vinny, we'll kind of we'll end the session. And there are no questions. Thank you all, and we'll
Thank you
see
all.
you in a couple of weeks.
Thank
Thank you, Vinny.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Vinny.